Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll give folks a few minutes to get into the room here. Good morning, good afternoon, folks. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are going to get started pretty quickly here as we've got lots to cover and just an hour to cover it. Vincent, so glad that you appreciated the music. We like to give a little, little smooth jazz kind of vibe as we get things going. My name is Elizabeth Gamble, and until recently, I was Elizabeth Shirt, making my initials ESG, which feels pretty fitting given what we're all here to talk about. I'm excited to be your host for today's webinar, and as I kick things off for us, I'll invite you to use the chat to introduce yourselves and share where you're joining from today. And I want to begin by acknowledging that I'm extremely fortunate to live, work, and play on the traditional and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations, also known as Vancouver. I have the privilege of leading the team at Globe, a Canadian-owned and operated business with a 30-year history of designing events that accelerate a resilient, competitive, and clean economy. My job at Globe, and really the focus of my whole career, has been about bringing people together to build relationships, foster connections, and advance solutions that result in a stronger economy, more resilient communities, and a healthier planet. The words you see on screen now were shared by Councillor Wilson Williams of the Squamish Nation at one of our recent Globe events. And when I have an opportunity to bring people together like we're doing today, I try to anchor myself in these words as a reminder of how I can be a part of advancing truth and reconciliation on a daily basis. Because it starts with conversation and connections, having an open mind, and considering what we can do to create a better future for this generation and for the generations that follow. And of course, that's exactly what brings us together today, because Canada is getting its very own Climate Week. Canada Climate Week Xchange will take place all across Canada, from coast to coast to coast, from November 24th to 30th, 2025. The initiative is being spearheaded by TMX Group of Companies, home of the Toronto Stock Exchange, and is being championed by founding partners, including the Canada Climate Law Initiative, CPA Canada, the First Nations Financial Management Board, the Responsible Investment Association, and Globe. Today, we're here to help you better understand the what, where, who, how, and why of Canada Climate Week Xchange, or CCWX, and how you and your organization can get involved. Before we dig in, I do want to share a few guidelines of engagement for the webinar. The chat will be open, and I see you using it, and we encourage you to do that to collaborate and share dialogue. We do ask that you use your real name in the chat, no anonymous posting, and we also ask that you engage respectfully. We will close the chat if we observe anything disrespectful, and I don't expect that to be a problem today. We will have time for Q&A, and we ask that you submit your questions using the Q&A function through Zoom. Please don't send questions you want answered into the chat. We will not be monitoring the chat for questions, and of course, you can engage with one another in the chat. If you wish to submit a question in French, please feel free. We have team members participating who can help with translation. So, we've already covered the when of CCWX, November 24th to 30th, 2025. We do recognize this is right on the heels of COP30, and what better time to reflect on Canada's role in driving climate action. We also recognize this is Thanksgiving week in the US, so it's a good thing. This is all about uniquely Canadian climate solutions. So what is CCWX all about? Well, the mission is pretty simple. We've made commitments to significant greenhouse gas reductions in Canada, and we are faced with a unique moment in time to create a uniquely Canadian space to collaborate on the solutions that can address our climate-related challenges and opportunities. CCWX is providing a platform for organizations of all shapes and sizes to host a wide variety of accessible, action-oriented events that focus on Canada's unique perspective and situation with respect to climate-related issues. So where will this happen? And who can get involved? Well, CCWX will not take place in any one city. We're not suggesting everyone descend on Toronto for the week. Our vision is that organizations step up to host events all across Canada, from coast to coast to coast, hosting events of all shapes and sizes, in person and online. In this way, CCWX is truly for everyone interested in tackling Canada's climate challenges. Our goal is to bring together communities, businesses, policymakers, and climate advocates to collaborate on solutions and opportunities for a more sustainable future. We want to encourage cross-collaboration and engagement, providing spaces for experts and everyday Canadians to connect and drive climate action. We want to foster inclusion and accessibility, ensuring underrepresented communities, both people and places, can participate. So unlike Climate Week New York, you won't need to travel to take part or to host an event. You won't need any kind of official accreditation to participate, although some events may require registration. You can host an event right in your own community under the banner of Canada Climate Week Xchange, or you can attend events online across the country. So how will this work? How can organizations get involved and host an event? Well, TMX and the founding partners have created the overarching framework for CCWX and have created the space to promote events that happen during the week. All you have to do is apply to host. Events can be hosted in person anywhere in Canada, or they can be hybrid, virtual, or even recorded. We do expect to see certain hubs in major cities across the country where people may tend to host events. However, there's no requirement to do so. Events can be in either official language and can take on all shapes and sizes, including large conferences, small roundtables or workshops, webinars, networking, performances, university or grassroots organized community events, and so much more. There is no fee to host an event. However, organizations who apply and are accepted to host an event are responsible for all the planning, logistics, and costs of delivering that event. Of course, you're free to set the terms for how that event is delivered. It can be free and open to the public. It can require registration or ticket purchase. It can be by invitation only, or it can be delivered with the support of partners and sponsors. That part is up to you. We do have one important requirement, though, and that is once your event has happened, we'll be asking all event organizers to submit an event statement of outcomes to help create a record of the action and impact CCWX is able to support. Lots more on event criteria can be found on the website, and I will be inviting our founding partners to join me on the screen a little later to provide more on this. But for now, to get the creative juices flowing, here are just a few examples of events that are already planned to be hosted under the CCWX banner. They span topics from policy and regulatory solutions to innovative technologies, to sustainable finance, to the intersection of climate and nature, and more. So, why would you want to host an event? The reality is we likely all have a slightly different why in terms of what drives us to pursue challenges to one of society's, solutions to one of society's toughest challenges. For me, I see a unique moment in time where we can come together to drive those solutions and build a more competitive Canadian economy. For those of you who know me, I'm an off-the-charts extrovert, and I get my energy from connecting and collaborating with people who share in the commitment to grow our economy, uplift our communities, and protect the planet. And I believe there is incredible power in bringing Canadians together to advance Made in Canada solutions. So now I'm going to invite two amazing thought leaders to share their perspectives on why it's never been more important to bring Canada together to drive those solutions. So please join me in welcoming Terri-Lynn Williams-Davidson to our virtual stage, a Haida musician, author, activist, artist, and lawyer who is well known for her work in Indigenous environmental law and as a recognized keeper of traditions. Terri-Lynn, please feel free to join me on screen, and we really look forward to hearing from you.
Hi there. Thank you very much for that wonderful opening. I'm just going to share my screen, and sorry about this. Great. So I'm really happy to be here today. I would like to acknowledge my home territory of Haida Gwaii. I live and work in Haida Gwaii, but also in the territory of the Semiahmoo First Nation here in White Rock. And I'm going to talk to you today. I'll jump right into my topic. I want to speak about Indigenous peoples and climate change, and about the fact that we're often the first to face climate change. We're disproportionately impacted, even though we contribute the least to greenhouse gas emissions. Climate change exacerbates the political and economic marginalization, loss of lands and resources, human rights violations, discrimination, and unemployment. Sharing more locally, Madam Justice McLaughlin said dealing with climate change is among the most important challenges that will face Canada and the world in the 21st century. The impact of climate change will be especially felt by already vulnerable people, exacerbating the social and legal difficulties they face. Sharing my thoughts, climate change is the next wave of colonization. Climate change threatens to steal the existence of Indigenous peoples and rights, making Canada's commitment to reconciliation unattainable. However, Indigenous peoples are vital to and contribute to the resilience of the Earth's ecosystems. At the same time, Indigenous peoples are resilient. We are not simply victims of climate change, but we have an important contribution to make to address climate change. Due to our close relationship with the environment, Indigenous peoples are uniquely positioned to adapt to climate change. And this is from the report of the Special Rapporteur of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. However, given all of that, we know that we're in a transforming legal landscape right now. We have, we're sort of in the wake of the report of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. We've had legislation enacted federally, as well as here in British Columbia. But despite all of that, we are still in the midst of colonization. And I'm sharing an image of my husband's artwork, a pole that depicts that moment of colonization. It's called We Were Once Silence, and it shows the anguish of our laws being suppressed and everything that has come with colonization, but yet that we now are expressing our own voice and asserting our place in the world. I always like to quote the Honorable and Formal Chief Justice Bowman, who said, if there's anything that the last 200 years of Canadian Indigenous relations has taught us, is that our jealous need for control is destructive. Indigenous peoples forcibly learned European language and history, became subject to settler colonial law, and were made to navigate a social system that did not reflect their values or traditions. The result was catastrophic. Now is the time to do what we should have done when we arrived here as uninvited guests, demonstrate that we care enough to discover and learn and to act responsibly within the matrix of Indigenous customs, traditions, and protocols. Now is the time for humility. And that is the humility to learn more about Indigenous laws, is what I advocate for. John Burroughs has said that Indigenous laws may be regarded as literally being written on the earth. So that means that the lands and waters of this country are central to Indigenous peoples' place-based coexistence. They're central to our cultural identity and to the resurgence of legal traditions. This is far more than subsistence. It is a way of life that reflects and revitalizes ecological knowledge, ancient practices, the intergenerational transmission of knowledge and laws, all things that are necessary for our collective survival. So contributing to the resurgence of Indigenous laws can contribute to developing equitable and just solutions to climate change. I'm sharing here from another Indigenous scholar, Robert Clifford, who said that the climate crisis offers not only a challenge, but an opportunity. It is an opportunity to cultivate healthier relationships that Indigenous peoples have called for so long. The barriers that limit and restrain meaningful revitalization of Indigenous laws align closely with those that drive climate crisis. That's a really important point. We can draw Indigenous knowledges and ways of being, but those efforts must be genuine and initiate meaningful engagement with Indigenous communities to address historical injustices and present-day wrongs. And I want to thank you, Elizabeth, for your opening and grounding us that way. In conclusion, Indigenous laws and worldviews provide a powerful tool to reimagine new relationships with the earth. I'm going to share next a specific example of an embodied practice demonstrating one aspect of the Haida worldview and a relationship based on respect and reciprocity. My last words are, I respectfully invite all of you to reflect on settler colonialism in your efforts to develop solutions to Canada's climate change as we engage on this exciting adventure of what we're here to speak about today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Terri-Lynn, for sharing your knowledge with us, for sharing your song with us. We so appreciate it. Thank you. Next, it's my pleasure to welcome Catherine Abreu to join me on the virtual stage, an internationally recognized award-winning campaigner and advocate for advancing action on climate change. Her many leadership roles include serving as director of the International Climate Politics Hub and as an advisor to Canada's Net Zero Advisory Body. Catherine, why is it important for Canada to come together at this moment in time?
Yeah, thanks for that great question, Elizabeth, and it's great to be with you today. And I just want to really appreciate the offering that Terri-Lynn made, in particular having music and singing that carries such an important message in this kind of setting is rare and fed my spirit. So thank you, Terri-Lynn, for that. Okay, my main answer to your question, Elizabeth, is because Canadians care. Over the course of this election, I've been fielding media requests left, right, and center. Journalists are identifying that climate doesn't seem to be as much of a topic in this election as it has been in previous elections. And I think that's largely because, of course, the specter of shifting politics, particularly south of the border, have really consumed, understandably, our attention. But Canadians do care. And in fact, a very recent survey by Leger found that well over 2/3 of Canadians, about 70%, think that the next Canadian government, regardless of their political stripe, should be taking ambitious action on climate and nature protection. So it's important for us not to lose sight of that fact. That is an issue that Canadians really care deeply about. And in part, they care deeply about this issue because Canadians are experiencing the impacts of climate change. there are many communities across Canada who are on the front lines of climate impacts. Canada is warming much more quickly than other parts of the world. And so our communities have been experiencing these impacts for a long time, and they're only getting worse in terms of floods, fires, and major storms. The Insurance Bureau of Canada calculated last year that the cost of climate impacts was about $8.5 billion. We can't ignore that, right? If, for those of you on the line who think about the Canadian deficit and that's something that you feel some concern about, $8.5 billion is about a quarter of the deficit. So it's a huge number. And this links up to a global reality that we're seeing. Recently, Alliance, a major international insurer, said that the cost of climate change is becoming so vast that it's actually probably going to break some of the underlying tenets of capitalism, right? So there's this major insurance company saying climate change is going to make the current functioning of our economic systems impossible pretty soon. And so those impacts are impossible to ignore, and this is why Canadians are responding. And I think, many of us, when we consider these kinds of initiatives, we're thinking about, okay, what are the announceables? What are the outcomes? But a big part of why it's important for people to come together in these settings is because we know that facts don't change people's minds. So people like me kind of listing off our stats, it's helpful and important, but ultimately what changes people's minds is coming together with people that they see themselves in, people that they trust, that they consider colleagues, and seeing these people care about climate change. It's okay for me to care about climate change too. And when we come together, we build community for change. None of us can affect this issue alone. And it's only by building that community that we can come together to affect the change that's needed. And that's why I really appreciate the invitation for there to be a lot of folks coming into this space to plan events. And I'm just seeing a note in the chat, and I just want to say it can be crude to reduce the lived impacts that people are experiencing in terms of their loss of property and well-being to numbers. So just want to acknowledge that, I put those numbers forward because they're a way that we can summarize it, but those relate to very deep impacts that are being felt by people on the ground. And therefore, this is something that we need to keep talking about and finding solutions for.
Absolutely, Kat. It's challenging because sometimes the way to express that challenge comes to numbers in a way that's accessible, that actually bridges language and culture. And I mean, I think that $8.5 billion number, that's just insured losses, right? So again, that doesn't begin to capture the personal impacts on homes and lives and families. And thank you. I mean, thanks for anchoring us in a data point, because I think it's an important reference point. I mean, saying that, of course, climate change is a global issue. We're talking about a uniquely Canadian approach. Do you see value in that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think it's easy, particularly when so much of the news coverage is dominated by what's happening south of the border, to lose sight of the fact that taking action on climate change, and in particular, investing in this transition to a clean energy, a clean technology economy, is still a major opportunity and a major way in which Canada needs to avoid the risk of continuing to lose out on this growing global economy. And so I thought, just for the sake of offering a few more data points, for those who might be thinking that what's happening south of the border will actually delay some of those economic transitions, we're actually getting pretty regular reassurance from the economic thinkers in the world that the global clean energy transition away from um, carbon intensive sources of energy and uses of technology is still well underway. And a big part of that is because it's other countries in the world that invested very deeply in making this transition a success. And those countries will be benefiting from those investments. And Canada can't afford to keep missing out. So if we take a look around the world, developing economies are expected to account for about 70% of solar PV, 60% of wind development, battery storage as a major source of prosperity in some other countries. And that can be the story in Canada as well. And it is actually the story in many Canadian provinces. So we need to be lifting that up and bringing that to the national level. I think the other reason that we need that made in Canada approach is because these solutions need to speak to the lived realities of people's everyday lives. And we need to be designing climate solutions that can make sure the benefit is going directly to people. And it's only by thinking about that at the very domestic scale that we can make sure Canadian communities benefit from those solutions.
Thank you so much. I could, speak to you and Terri-Lynn and hear song all day. We are going to shift back to sort of practical, tactical. How do I get involved? But Catherine, as a final question for you, and it's a tough one, what is one thing that you would see, coming out of this first ever Canadian Climate Week, Canada Climate Week Exchange? What would success look like? Like, what's one thing we could achieve?
So the thing that we really need to have a conversation about in Canada is how we design policies, whether they're economic or environmental policies, to do more than one thing at once. Our policies have to walk and chew gum at the same time. We need environmental policies that make some of those co-benefits, cleaner air, more livable communities, more affordable energy bills. Those need to be the explicit outcomes of climate and environmental policies. And likewise, our industrial policy needs to be building in the protection and the action on climate that will ensure the success of that long-term industrial and economic policy. So I think if this Climate Week can achieve anything, it's sending that strong message to decision makers, again, of every political stripe in Canada, that the Canadian actors are on board for this project of designing policies that can deliver on a number of things that we need at the same time, including economic development, including job creation, and including climate protection.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Kat. If you weren't inspired to get involved before, I'm sure that Terri-Lynn and Catherine have changed that. So thank you so much. Please feel free to stick around, both Terri-Lynn and yourself. Folks may have questions for you, and we're going to keep the ball rolling here. We're going to dig now back into some of the who, what, when, where, and how. And at this time, I'm going to invite the wonderful founding partners of CCWX, a wonderful group of leaders and experts in their own right, to join me on screen to help with digging into some more questions and opportunities. So welcome to all my friends and colleagues as we get you spotlighted on the screen here. And I am going to start first with Eliza Riego joining us from TMX Group, one of the primary minds behind this wonderful initiative and standing it up. And so, Eliza, thank you for that. And I want to start with you. Why is TMX championing a Canadian Climate Week Exchange?
Thank you, Elizabeth. And I know this on the chat, there was just so many thank yous. So thank you, Kat, and thank you so much, Terri-Lynn. It was amazing what you said, your words, your song, truly inspirational. In thinking about the question about why TMX is championing a Canadian Climate Week, again, I'm answering from the position of where I sit in terms of my company. So there was three main reasons, although there is a host of other personal reasons why I would want to do this and why I was inspired to bring this forth. So as Elizabeth, you said, TMX owns and operates the Toronto Stock Exchange and TSX Venture Exchange. And the first recognition was that our listed companies on our exchanges play a very key role in helping our country meet the GHG reduction goal. Between Toronto Stock Exchange and TSX Venture Exchange, we list over 2,000 companies across Canada. And working with these companies to support their decarbonization efforts, climate reporting, energy transitions, their climate innovations, and more is essential if we're going to get anywhere close to reducing GHG emissions for our country. The second is our role in ensuring that our listed companies are included in conversations on emerging policies like Kat had mentioned, and mandates and other requirements that have an impact on their operations. Canada Climate Week Xchange is founded on the idea that we need more collaboration, not only across the country, but across various interested parties and organizations. It's my belief that corporate engagement on climate issues can yield greater action, transparency, authenticity, and innovation. And the final reason was the slow pace of change that I was seeing in Canada. Our country needs to continue to play a role in global forums on climate, but here at home, we need to find alignment and have collaboration to create pathways towards meeting our GHG reduction goals.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Eliza, and thanks again for being a champion of this initiative. So, Carol, I'm going to come to you next, our wonderful founding partner member with Canada Climate Law Initiative. Can you talk a little bit about what we're looking for in events? You know, what are the topics, formats? Are there things that won't be accepted? Over to you.
Sure. Thank you so much. It's so great to be part of this group and to be promoting this important week. We're looking for events that align with Canada Climate Week Xchange's mission and goals. So we're looking for a variety of action-oriented, accessible events that focus on Canada's unique perspective and situation on climate-related issues. And Elizabeth, as you mentioned, we're open to almost any type of event format. Bears repeating: in-person, hybrid, virtual, open access, invite only. Events can be free or with an associated cost as long as the event is available during the week. Could be, a half or multi-day conference, webinar, panel, workshop, art or poster exhibition, a performance, artistic, events at a school or university or grassroots community activities, a variety of content from coast to coast to coast that supports our country's commitment to significant reductions in GHG emissions and helps to drive solutions and opportunities. And some examples of topics which are non-exhaustive: renewable, clean energy, critical minerals, Indigenous stewardship, sustainable finance, carbon tax and pricing, electrification. I could go on, but a lot. And as for topics that will not be accepted, we'll say any events that debunk climate change or deniers of climate science, for one. Any event where the focus doesn't connect to CCWX's mission and goals. So it needs to focus on Canadian climate problems, solutions, adaptations, innovations. We also discourage any product or service demonstrations or sales unless it's part of a larger showcase from a variety of providers or commingled with content that is action-oriented. So we'll screen events on their ability to demonstrate that alignment with that focus on Canadian climate-related issues and that they have an action-oriented outcome. And also events that demonstrate at least one or more of the following: cross-collaboration that drives solutions or action, inclusion and accessibility, allowing underrepresented communities, people, places to participate, youth participation, and or diversity among the speakers and languages. So it's going to be a great, impactful, incredible week of cross-collaboration. Get those event applications in, and it's going to really just showcase, I think, also to this community across the country. So really excited, and looking forward to it.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Carol. Jeanette, I'm going to come to you next. Jeanette Hill with CPA Canada. We've seen some questions from folks asking about, how do I access certain topics or content? How do I make sure that that shows up? Can you speak to that a little bit?
Absolutely. And I think what's really exciting about this is what we've already alluded to in this webinar is that the content is really up to all of you watching. So there is immense opportunity to actually influence the content of this. And I'm seeing a lot of really exciting conversations in the chat where folks want to look for partners to start arranging things. So this is really exciting to see, and exactly the point of getting everyone together today. So I would encourage everyone that if you're looking for specific topics, check the event listing. You can actually go to ccwx.ca/events, and you can see some of the events that are already happening on there, as well as information on how to host your own event. So take a look at the event listing, and you can think about where your topic might fit in and what's missing and what you'd like to see, and start taking some action. So I think that's really the main pieces for how to get what you want to see on the agenda for Climate Week. So very exciting to have the opportunity to have folks from all over Canada involved in this.
Thanks, Jeanette. A couple of practical questions coming in. One is, can we get a recording? We will send a recording out to folks after the event by email, a link. And also a reminder, if you have specific questions, please put them in through the QA function. We want to hear from you. We want to answer your questions. And so if you can use the QA function at the bottom of your screen, that would be wonderful. So next, Grant, I'm going to come to you, joining us with the First Nations Financial Management Board. Lots of folks already active in the chat about how do I collaborate? How do I connect? Would love to hear your thoughts about how we can drive that collaboration.
Sure. Thank you for the invite. I realize I don't use Zoom a lot, so that background is actually my grandma and the way they used to deliver mail in the north. So very proud of it, but I also just wasn't sure what my background was going to show up. But anyway, my name is Grant Christoph. I am a member of Soto First Nation, which is part of Treaty 8 Tribal Association in Northern British Columbia, also the General Counsel at First Nations Financial Management Board. We serve over 300 First Nation communities across the country, either recognizing the capacity that we know exists within our communities or strengthening those areas collaboratively with the First Nations communities we serve on financial management systems. The reason we're interested in Climate Week is the same reason we're interested in a lot of conversations around economic reconciliation, and Terri-Lynn referenced it as well in her presentation. We do not want Indigenous voices to be lost in the rush to strengthen the Canadian economy, because we know we are already facing disproportionately the impacts of climate change, but we also know that we have a lot of solutions and contributions towards the things that are possible as we strengthen our focus a lot on energy projects. And I'll say my personal interest after I left the Department of Justice. In my community, we have a huge hydroelectric project. It's the third of 3 dams. We also, if it's not dams, it's coal. If it's not coal, it's natural gas. And then there's wind farms. All of them have implications reduced from the other power sources that we're using now. So somebody mentioned earlier personal interest. So I have a personal interest in ensuring that that we at very least talk about the impacts of climate change in an informed way, but we also listen to our Indigenous voices and we try to collaboratively develop solutions. And I have to be honest, I know I don't like to be focused solely on what's happening south of the border, but I can't help but think that it is time for Canada to step up and continue to be a leader in this area and show that not only is it possible, but it's also an economic reality to focus on what we can do to both combat climate change, but also respond to the need to strengthen our economy independent of what's happening in the States. So thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much, Grant, and thanks for sharing the focus on collaboration that your organization is driving, and it is something we absolutely want to see as part of Canada Climate Week. So reach out, collaborate, submit those events with your partners. I'm going to shift now to Adi, joining us from RIA, Responsible Investment Association. Adi, what kind of speakers are you excited to see, and how can we make sure really, diverse perspectives get involved in Canada Climate Week Xchange?
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. And those are really excellent questions. And there are 3 things that I'd like to highlight to our audience today. The first is just to reiterate how critical it is that we convene speakers with diverse perspectives across a range of industries, because as we know, climate change is a systemic issue. There's no one group or organization or individual that can solve it single-handedly. And I think that the founding member group of CCWX and the breadth of the industries and communities that we represent is such a great example of that. We also know that marginalized communities are often disproportionately impacted by climate change. So it is so important that we have their participation amongst other very diverse and broad-ranging perspectives. The second thing that I'd like to point out is that we, as the founding members and steering committee, aren't the ones that are going to be securing all of the speakers and events. It's you. So please, we encourage you to spread the word and share information about Climate Week with any individuals or organizations or entities that you think would be interested in contributing. But having said that, if we do notice that there are any major gaps in the sort of roster of programming, we will be tapping different organizations on the shoulder, but there's a real power in numbers. So we really encourage you to do the same. And finally, I think it's worth reiterating that we are hoping to include events and speakers from across the country in both English and French. And we do welcome events in all formats, online and in person. So hopefully that removes any barriers to participation. And if you have any questions at all about your own participation, how to get involved, please don't hesitate to get in touch.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Adi. We are going to open things up to some of the questions coming in from the audience shortly. I will remind you, we're looking to focus on questions related to how do I get involved in Canada Climate Week Xchange. I love seeing that folks are looking to engage, and I am surrounded by an incredibly smart group of individuals here who are actually doing the work around climate action. And with the time we have, we are looking to focus on the how of CCWX. So we will focus answering questions around the logistics, the practical, tactical, how do I get involved? So we can create that space to drive the critical action we're talking about. Before I do that though, I wanted to speak to one more aspect of the practical, tactical, which is, so you've decided you want to be involved. What's the next step? Well, we've just run through the why, what, where, when, who, how of CCWX broadly. And if you're interested in being involved, I would suggest you start by asking yourself those questions. What's your why when it comes to being involved in Climate Week? What Canadian climate solution or challenge are you uniquely positioned to champion? Who would you need to bring together to drive that action? Where and how would it be best to make that happen? From there, take a look at the event criteria. We promise they are not onerous, and make any adjustments needed to ensure you're aligned with the CCWX framework as you're thinking through that who, what, where, when, how, and why. Next, apply. Get the application in. And if you need support, Globe, TMX, and all the founding partners are here to answer questions and help you on that journey. We want to see you be successful. So with that, let's flip to some questions that are coming in from the audience. I do see a couple of great practical questions. Are there corporate sponsorship opportunities? Is a question coming through. I can start that off and then maybe turn it over to the group. The short answer is, as you're putting your events together, you are welcome to work with partners and sponsors to make that happen. That is not, will not be a function of this founding partner group. However, we do encourage you to work with partners to find those sources of funding to make your events happen. Second question coming through, is there a main program similar to Climate Week New York, or is it just decentralized events under the conference branding banner? At this moment in time, we are looking at some cool opening events at TMX. However, we are not necessarily doing that big sort of opening plenary main program. Again, the goal being that we see events happen all across the country in a really accessible way. Eliza, I wanted to turn to you just to see if you want to add anything in terms of those questions coming in.
Yeah, so I think a lot of people are used to a certain format if they're familiar with New York Climate Week. And we took this in a different direction, again, kind of decentralizing, ensuring that there's cross-country accessibility and involvement. And so for that reason, this year, we don't have a main stage. It's not a conference. I kind of see some other questions. So there is no conference. It is really made by individuals who want to talk about and find solutions around Canada and climate. So yeah, so we are doing a few events within our TMX premises here in Toronto, but certainly we don't want to only see Toronto events by any means. And so really encourage you to either find other partners or sponsors so you have the opportunity to have a voice, invite those that are part of your audience or the people that you think would bring success and good outcomes to your event.
Thanks so much, Eliza. So great question coming in from an individual who's with a small manufacturing firm wanting to contribute to the initiative and collaborate. And the question being, what would opportunities look like for a company like theirs to get involved? I don't want to take all the airtime here. I wondered, Jeanette, CPA Canada works with lots of businesses of all shapes and sizes. You spoke a little bit to the types of events and the folks that we want to see. Do you want to tackle this one, or would anybody else like to jump in?
I can start. I think if there's smaller organizations that want to jump in, definitely reach out. I'm happy to put my LinkedIn in there as well, and you can always submit an application and put in some information on what your thoughts are, and even if you have any ideas about what type of support you would need. Is it financial support? Is it helping to find speakers? Is it a location? Is it logistical support? So if you have any parameters, or if you're looking for all of those parameters, for example, that's another thing that you can send in with either your application or reaching out to any of the organizations, depending on if you see someone on the panel here that your organization and your mission and vision is quite aligned with. For example, there's some organizations that are focused more on the financial piece, RA and CPA Canada, and then others more on the legal. So I would also take that into consideration where you're looking for that support, whatever it may be. So I hope that that's helpful for you, because we do want to be as inclusive as possible with this event. That's absolutely one of the keys here.
Thanks so much, Jeanette. And yeah, I would also lean back into the collaborative opportunity, right? We would encourage organizations to partner. If you're part of an association, maybe there's an opportunity through that association to put together an event, as well as doing things that are lighter lift and low cost, like virtual events. Next question we see. Yeah.
Sorry, I was just going to also add in, thank you, Jeanette, so much for offering, for people to reach out to you personally. There's also an email that you can use that's on our website to pass along any inquiries. So if you have something more specific to you, if you want to set up a meeting, that is possible as well. I believe it's info@ccwx.ca. I should know this, but it's on our website.
And we shared that in the chat earlier, and before we wrap, we'll make sure that gets up on screen again so everybody has that email. Thanks so much, Eliza. Great question. Is the issue of adaptation to the impacts of climate change or resiliency of interest? Resounding answer is yes. We heard from Catherine this morning that those impacts of a changing climate are being widely felt in Canada and around the world. One way to measure that is financial, and of course, it's the impacts are far-reaching. So that is 100%. We would see that as a fit in terms of events and programming that would be part of Canada Climate Week Xchange. Does anybody want to add anything to that?
Just briefly, I know this is an issue that we talk a lot about with not only the communities we serve, but with national Indigenous organizations, including the Assembly of First Nations, on the infrastructure deficit within our communities. But in building that new critical infrastructure, not only on and off, but also off reserve, we are looking at adaptation, but I don't know if that's code for more expensive, because it really is a lot more expensive, because in order to address, and somebody mentioned earlier, some of the climate impacts, both fire as well as floods, which are happening more frequently. Once in a lifetime events are not once in a lifetime anymore, but that's a big topic of concern for not only the communities we represent, but pretty much everybody across Canada. So thank you.
And I'll also add to beautiful part about this is the opportunity for local leaders to really amplify and collaborate, that's specific also in terms of their region. One of the topics that I don't think I mentioned in the long laundry list that, you know, we'd love to see emphasis on is access to remote communities and issues that are related to there. So that real diversification and decentralization of this week and that ability to connect all across along these wide-ranging topics, for that small manufacturing company, for people that want to talk about adaptation that may be specific to their geography. Like it's really a fantastic opportunity to be able to do that in the way that we've like decentralized it. So just wanted to emphasize that.
Yes, thank you so much, Carol. Really great and easy one to answer. Is this event annual? Yes, that's the goal. We want to see this become an annual going concern here in Canada. So thanks for that question, if it hadn't come out clearly before. Another great question. Is the organizing committee considering potential for a media partner? Eliza, maybe this is something you could speak to in terms of some of the ways TMX is championing CCWX.
Yeah, and maybe I'll relate it to another question about promotion. There certainly is a level of promotion that we can commit to, and that includes, once you're approved, the ability to send out a press release about your involvement, as well as what you see on the website and social media support. I think we would be open to a discussion about other media. I hesitate to use partnerships, as my in-house counsel will warn me again and again to not use that word, but we can have a further conversation. So again, if you utilize the email address on our website, we can certainly have a conversation about that. So yeah, hopefully that, and if there's other broader ideas, listen, we have a small committee by design, and there's always room for other great ideas. And because this is annual, we will look to iterate year to year and see what we can do to support CCWX and its success.
Awesome. Thank you, Eliza. So great clarifying question here in term, and Eliza, you touched on some of that. What would the partners provide in terms of resources to support events? So we are creating that framework and that anchor and a place to showcase and get the word out about events that are happening. Otherwise, events are self-funded, and at the same time, you are more than welcome to look to partner, to seek funding, to stand up your event, and look to anchor it as part of that CCWX website. So at this time for first annual, the support that we're able to provide really is creating that space, creating that framework, and holding space to let folks know the great events that are happening. And I just want to create space for anybody else to jump in on that question. So great question about how CCWX might complement other events happening in Canada, sometimes annually, sometimes every 2 years. I'll speak to that first and then open it up. I mean, for Globe, where our business is all about bringing people together to drive positive action and impactful change, we are looking at ways to align topics, content, impact, outcomes, so that we're hosting events as part of Climate Week that align with other events that we'll host, like Globe Forum, like Globe Xchange, and other partners that we work with to help make their events happen. So I would encourage you strongly to think about how events that happen during Canada Climate Week Xchange can align with, can amplify the convening that you do, and even consider whether your event that you would host on an annual basis could be shifted to be a part of that week, to perhaps even more greatly amplify that impact and opportunity. I see lots of nodding, so I'll open it up if other folks want to jump in and comment.
I was just going to say that we've discussed this before. We all know we're not going to solve for climate, for our climate challenges in 1 week. And so we recognize that there are going to be other events, and a lot of them quite big. So certain conferences that people will have, but again, where we can find alignment or maybe I don't know if this is the right word, but like a satellite type event that you can hold through CCWX that does support your larger event that may happen outside of that week. We encourage you to have a conversation with us or submit an application about a smaller event that you might run through the week.
And Eliza, I think one other thing that I'll just add to that is it's a really great space, like Elizabeth was saying, to come in and elevate voices and organizations that might not get a chance at some of these larger events, right? So it's really elevating those perspectives as well. And like I said earlier, if you have an idea, just submit an application. And we're happy to have a look if you include what types of supports you're looking for. I would encourage you, as we've said here, to connect with others. I see University of Toronto said if anyone's interested in partnering to reach out. So there's lots of organizations that would be willing to help. And if you're really stuck, put that in your application and we'll always have a look and see where we can help give some guidance there.
One thing I'll add, and just to say, couldn't agree more with Eliza and Jeanette, is that think of all of the events and all of the exchanges and everything happening during this 1 week and all of the further ideas that are going to get sparked because of it that can help inform and can help elevate and amplify other events that are running throughout the year. I think, Eliza, it was you that said, we're not going to solve climate change in 1 week. We all know that. But think of it almost like as a jumping off point that we can use to inspire future conversations and different convenings throughout the rest of the year. So I think we're all really excited about that and all of the opportunities.
I'm going to add one more point because one other thing that I was just thinking of as we were talking there was the visibility as well, that the TMX group and having everything under this one umbrella and all the great partners that are on this call today can help provide. And again, I'm going back to that inclusivity in those smaller organizations. It's a great opportunity to have that visibility.
Thank you all so much. And so we're getting close to the top of the hour here, which the time has flown by. Thank you all so much for submitting your questions. I'm going to try to tackle a couple more before we wrap things up. And we will make sure to share, we'll show you and share again in the chat how you can reach out with more questions and where you can go to get to find out more. Great question in terms of as event applications come in, what can be done to make sure or to help to manage events happening in local areas so they're not competing. We are, as the founding partner group, going to do what we can to help enable that as applications come in. We will be actively and quickly posting events online so you can see what other events might be happening in your local area so you can align in a way that's complementary and not competing. And we will also, as we review events, do our best to advise. You may want to consider a different time because something's competing in the local area, things like that. Anybody else want to jump in on that one? Eliza, please.
Yeah, this is a question that comes up quite often. Obviously, we want as many events as possible to allow for as much engagement on the vast number of possible topics that there are. So I think, Carol, you gave a small snippet of like what all those type of events could tackle. So whether there would be the same event in the same place happening at the same time, target at the same audience under the same topic, like it's probably not going to happen. But if you get your application in earlier and it's out there for people to consider, then other applicants will say, okay, well, this is happening here. Maybe I need to tweak the audience or tweak the topic. So that way it allows for people to find exactly what is of interest to them and what they can actually attend.
So with that, I want to be respectful of everyone's time. Thank you so much, everyone, all the speakers, thought leaders, partners for being part of this. Thank you to the tech team behind the scenes making this happen. Here's some of the ways you can stay up to date on all things CCWX. You can visit the website, sign up for the newsletter, follow the founding partners on social media, use that hashtag when you're out there looking for collaborators and partners. And of course, our info at ccwx.ca. Please use that email to reach out with any other questions. With that, We are about to hit top of the hour. Thank you so much for joining us. Again, where you can find additional information, and if you'd like support thinking through or hosting an event, the founding partners are here. We would be thrilled to hear from you. Thanks, everybody, and we will see you at Canada Climate Week Exchange. Have a great day.